And I decided I really wanted to do that full-time, so I actually quit my job and moved to Southeast Asia to learn more about spices.
Break the stigma and really talk about different aspects and different angles of consuming. And I think, how many people in here are having a drink right now? And the reality is, you could be drinking a cannabis beverage that has the same potency that a beer does or that a glass of wine does. It's just culturally, and the optics of it have been really challenging.
I looked at Clover and I said, my gosh, this is like a unicorn. It's got an unbelievable economic model. It is just the absolute right thing to be doing from a environmental standpoint, from a moral standpoint.
Well, welcome to WGBH. My name is Edgar B. Herwick III. What Boston Talks is we do this monthly. We gather here. It's our Smarter Happy Hour, as we call it. And each month we have 3 speakers who we invite here to talk on a theme. Our theme for this evening is forecasting food. And we've got 3 great speakers who are going to share a little bit of their lives and work with us. We're going to hear about somebody who probably knows more, I'm going to guess knows more about spices than your average person. And I'm really interested to hear about this and what is happening in the world of spices and what the future world of spices looks like, because I think about it as such an old-time thing in a way. So please welcome to the stage the founder of the Curio Spice Company, Claire Cheney. Spices. This is like your life, right? I imagine there's a journey that sort of begins somewhere that gets you there, right? You don't just kind of whole cloth go, you know what I want to do when I grow up? I want to be a spice maven. Were you in the food world, I assume, in some capacity before you started this company? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I graduated college, I thought I was going to be a writer. I love writing. I still love writing. And I loved writing about food. And the first job that I got, of course, was not a job as a writer, but for a specialty coffee company. And I learned while working in specialty coffee that I was very good at tasting things and distinguishing minute differences in the way things
taste. You've got a good palate.
But I also started learning about single origin and the stories of the farmers and where things come from and how we can uplift farmers. And it started to unfold a real passion for the connection between food and agriculture and the stories that our food can tell us. So fast forward, I started working for Anna Sortun and her restaurant group. She uses a lot of spices. And I actually...
What are some of her restaurants for those who maybe don't know?
Yes. Oleana Restaurant in Cambridge, Sofa Bakery, and now Sarma in Somerville. And she was a great mentor for me. And while I was working... I worked at both Oleana and Sofra, and while I was working at Sofra, I started doing all the spice blending. I started taking it away from everyone else.
So what does that entail? Like, what is the job of spice blender? And if you're working in a restaurant and like that's what you're doing, what does that mean even?
Totally, and I think it's important to note that a lot of restaurants don't make their own spice blends, so it was kind of a unique thing at Sofra. And it involves toasting spices, grinding spices, blending them to be harmonious. So I started inventing my own blends when I was there and selling them, and that was really awesome. And I decided I really wanted to do that full-time, so I actually quit my job and moved to Southeast Asia to learn more about spices.
Where in Southeast Asia? and how did you decide Southeast Asia? Like, how does that happen?
Well, it was very convenient because my brother happened to be living in Bangkok at the time. So I had a free place to stay, and Bangkok happens to be an awesome hub. Oh, there's a nice cinnamon peeler in Sri Lanka. I traveled to Sri Lanka, I traveled to Cambodia, Vietnam, India. It was a great kind of hub for traveling and learning from spice producers.
So what is were you kind of like hooked immediately and you were like, I'm going to become like an expert on spices? Was there a lot of like studying, or was it sort of more the like, I'm going to go to these places and just talk to these farmers and deal in spices that I already kind of know about. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, I don't think I was convinced that I was going to be a spice expert. I was just really excited to learn, and I was really curious. And I actually was kind of operating under the auspices that I was going to write about them. And I was writing on my blog, and I was interviewing people with the idea of pitching articles to various
So like travel
publications.
writer with like a little bit of a spice niche. That was kind of
Yeah, and I had this
idea.
inkling of a business because I knew
yeah.
writing didn't pay very well. So
Yeah, I mean, true.
yeah, it's true.
So how long did you spend traveling and meeting people and doing that?
I was in Thailand. I was based in Thailand for 4 months. I was planning to be there for a year, but I was in a relationship, and my boyfriend came over and proposed and dragged me home.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a love story too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where are some of the places you went in these early travels, and what did you learn about these people who were farming, or these people who were sort of at the the starting point of the kind of creation of this whole industry of spices?
Yeah, one of my favorite places that I traveled to was Sri Lanka, which, when you mentioned saying, spices are kind of old or days of yore, I mean, Sri Lanka goes way back.
Yeah.
And many countries fought over having the monopoly on cinnamon in Sri Lanka. So it was awesome going there and learning about the history, but also learning about the current day spice production that takes place. And we now source from a region called Kandy, which is right in the center of Sri Lanka, and it's where we get cinnamon and ginger and cloves. But most importantly, the cooperative that we work with is awesome at working with smallholder farmers who are kind of marginalized in the commodity market and helping them both transition to organic to get a better price for their spices, but also to work with buyers like us that are trying to find a supremely delicious product. So they really work on the quality of their production.
How much for sort of the average person, how much variation is there in sort of the taste of spices? Even I think about something like salt, pepper, even very simple ones. Like, can it really be that different?
Yes, definitely. No, it's a great question. I think pepper is my favorite one to talk about because pepper is the world's most widely traded spice.
Really?
It is.
Huh.
And that's a fact, I know.
Wow.
I don't know that many facts, but I think that's one of them. Pepper, because it's produced all over the world and is in high demand, can have really interesting terroir. Now, mostly when you go to the grocery store and you're buying a pepper off the shelf, it's a mixture of different origins, so you're getting kind of typical pepper flavor, but you're not getting a special combination of flavor profiles distinct to a place.
So with you mean like if I buy like McCormick black pepper or something like that, I'm just getting kind
You're
of
probably getting Vietnamese pepper mixed with Indian pepper mixed with whatever pepper.
How many peppers how many types of pepper do you sell at your shop?
We sell at least a dozen different types of peppers, and then pepper relatives like long pepper or wild pepper from Madagascar that's found in the jungle, things like that.
So let's talk about your shop, your company. What's the premise? What do you do? Like, what goes on in your shop?
Yeah, so Curios Spice Company is a mission-driven company. We are a public benefit corporation, so we have the farmer in mind when we are buying spices. We have our community in mind. We source not only from organic and small farmer cooperatives around the world, but we also source from New England farmers for things like seaweed and herbs and salt. And so we are trying to change the way spices are traded and really deliver a message in addition to just spices. But our shop is really awesome because it's very interactive. So you can come in the doors and smell our whole collection, and that I think is a really exciting experience because spices are all about the smell.
Good, yeah.
Because spices smell great, yeah. So we are, our signature line of blends are kind of storytelling blends, and they're each named after places that we source the spices, and those are what are over on the table over there.
Yeah, so we have some. Are they making their way around it?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
there's one.
Yeah. So hopefully you folks have seen some. You can smell them, taste them. So give me an example of you've mentioned multiple times this idea of like writing and storytelling and connecting that with our food and our spices. Give me an example of like the story of like one of your spice blends or something, like so that I understand how they connect.
For sure. So one of our most popular blends is called Kempot and Salt, and it's a pepper and salt blend. So since we were talking about single origin pepper just a little bit ago, the Kempot and Salt is celebrating this special pepper from southern Cambodia that comes from Kempot. It's a little village, and it's...
What's good about this particular pepper? What do you like about it?
Oh man, it is so tasty. This particular pepper just has this flavor profile that is super clean, super bright. It has some notes of jasmine, eucalyptus. It's like it's perfumey, but not in a gross way. It's just a really exuberant peppercorn. So on its own, it's kind of expensive and sometimes kind of intimidates people because it's like, oh, like what if I waste the peppercorn?
Yeah. Right.
What if I ruin it? So by putting it in this blend with some Maine sea salt and some lime and tarragon, it's a blend that is really evocative of Cambodian cuisine, but easier to use, and you can get to know the peppercorn through the blend. And it's just a really wonderful little. It has a protected designation of origin. This pepper.
It has a what?
Like champagne can only be from Champagne, France.
Oh.
Kempot pepper can only come
Oh,
from
it's
Kempot.
like you can't call it that if it's not from there.
Yeah.
And you sort of, if I buy a spice from your shop, it's like you know exactly, like you know the farmer who's making that stuff, right? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, exactly. We try to have as much transparency about where the spices come from as possible. Now, everything in our shop is not sourced directly, if only because we want to provide a good selection of spices.
Sure.
But that's what we're working towards, and that's the future.
Yeah, and yeah. So talk a little bit about that, because how does the spice world work now? I mean, you sort of mentioned that you're mission driven, and the idea is to sort of disrupt or change to some extent the spice trade. How does the spice trade work now? And what is it that's different about what you're doing? Right.
So the spice trade traditionally has been highly exploitive. The commodity spice trade is where most of the spices that are in the world live, and so similar to the coffee and chocolate industries, where they're going to these big warehouses and sitting on the shelves, and the farmer isn't hardly getting anything for producing that product. And also the flavor is suffering. So we're trying to take spices out of the commodity market and celebrate them for being specialty, beautiful plant products. And it's really challenging because there's a lot of spices out there.
Yeah.
And McCormick is very, very big.
Yeah. Does that? Are there other people who are doing what you're doing? Is it a movement? Is it a burgeoning movement? Do you connect with these other folks who are trying to change it from the level that you're at, which is kind of retail and the end user side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a small community of like-minded spice companies here in the States and in Canada, and we've all connected. And while we're competing with each other, we're still trying to honor the values that we all share and really, change the industry, because the point is to have more socially responsible producers and industry people. I mean, there's a lot of middlemen in spices. A vanilla bean grown by a farmer in Madagascar will go through 10 different hands before it comes to you as the consumer.
Really? And everybody takes a cut along the way.
And so that vanilla farmer is making probably $1 a day to produce vanilla and will cost you $12. So it's just absurd how messed up it is. But that's why I traveled to Madagascar 2 years ago and tried to just chip away at understanding the economics of vanilla and what's going on, what are the issues related to it. And even having gone there, I still feel like I don't understand. Like, people aren't telling you the truth. There's a lot of sketchy stuff going on. But because we are a woman-owned business, one of my goals when I went there was to find out, how are women involved in the trade. And fortunately, the folks we source from treat their people really well, and the women are paid really well and seem to like what they're doing. So I feel good about that.
Is it? Can it be frustrating, like the idea that like you're sort of going up against this like enormous sort of process that is really entrenched, and you're kind of going like, I can't even figure this out. Like, why? What motivates you to sort of keep chipping away at it?
I think what motivates me is cooking. I mean, we eat every day, and we have to eat every day, and I like to eat good food, so I like to cook with good ingredients. And so those ingredients are the things that can make a difference. So if, and I think by kind of narrowing it down to spices, obviously I try to buy local eggs and do all that, but
I don't know how many, true honesty, how many of us really think about where our spices are coming from? I think there's a few of us, right? which I think is great. But I think about the last 10 years, right? There's definitely people have gotten far more conscientious about where many things are coming from, like you were saying, like eggs or meat.
Right.
But in terms of spices, I don't know. Like I don't hear that much about it.
Totally, and I think that's where we have an opportunity with Curio, is to excite you as eaters and cooks and gift givers, frankly, because not everybody likes to cook. But usually you know somebody who does. But especially in New England, I think, or even in America as a whole, where as a cuisine, it's not particularly spice heavy. And yet, U.S. depends on immigrants, and the immigrant culture in the U.S. depends on spices to kind of define it. So that's what's really exciting. In North Cambridge, we have a Sri Lankan restaurant, an Ethiopian restaurant, a Lebanese restaurant, and all of those places have these different spice palettes, and it's a great entry point to talk about spices.
So let's talk about, before we finish, I want to talk about some spices. Favorite spices, spice trends. Is the world of spices like that? Are there like spices that become popular and then kind of wane in popularity? Like, what is, like from just a pure like flavor and like what's out there standpoint, I don't know, make the case for some spices maybe some of us might want to try if we haven't thought about them, or spices that you suspect may become popular over the next 6 months, year and a half?
Totally. So probably everyone has heard of saffron. Has everyone heard of saffron? Who's cooked with saffron? Oh, a lot of people. Cool.
Yes.
Well, it's one of my favorite spices.
It's the yellow one, right?
Yes, it turns things yellow. The threads are kind of red. Oh. But certainly, kind of single origin saffron is a cool thing, and is something that is up and coming, especially Afghan saffron, where companies are trying to get farmers out of opium farming into saffron
interesting.
farming.
Huh.
So that's a really cool thing to keep an eye out for. I mean, it's already out there, but matcha and Japanese ingredients are having a moment. I mean, Starbucks has all kinds of matcha lattes on the menu now. Certainly something to kind of get to know and use because it's super delicious. Yuzu is another Japanese ingredient. And I think up and coming are specific African palettes, so things like the Ethiopian spice palette, Ghanaian, Eritrean, things like that maybe people have tried but don't necessarily cook at home. And I think by having spices that you can bring home, you can kind of access this cuisine that otherwise is very foreign. So
if I'm walking away from here today and I'm like, man, I'm gonna think about spices a little bit more, and I'm interested in sort of connecting with you or understanding more about it, how do I do that? I come into your shop. What? I come into your shop, buy some spices, or you got social media stuff? Are there like spice classes I can take somewhere? How does it all work?
Yes, well, I definitely invite everyone to come by the Spice Shop. We're located in North Cambridge on Mass Ave, so easy to find us. And we do offer spice classes, but honestly, just coming to the shop is kind of a miniature spice class. I have an awesome team at Curio, and they all are really passionate about food and flavor, and they'll take you right to their favorite spices or talk about cooking. So yeah, we do also offer formal classes like our Spice 101 class.
So what happens in Spice 101? Like, tell me a little bit quickly about
Yeah.
Spice 101.
Well, it's great. It's
Is it like a one-shot deal? I come once, or is it like 6 weeks intensive?
You know,
Learn
we
about
should start
spices.
that maybe.
You're welcome.
The intensive version. Right now it's just one,
Okay.
but it's meant for the beginner or even if you know a lot about spices but want to learn more. And it's just about how to use spices more in your cooking, how to use them more effectively in your cooking, different techniques, how to store your spices in your kitchen, and also just about spice blends and how you might start being creative in the kitchen with spices. So it's a lot of fun.
Claire Chaney, everybody, let's hear it for her. Who has seen either one of the Clover Foods restaurants or food trucks out and about somewhere? That's good to know because we are going to hear a little bit more about what they do and get a little bit of an inside look at it from the COO, their Chief Operating Officer. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Greg Donahue. Greg, it's good. You've got a friendly audience. Most of them know about Clover, so that's good. But for those among us who maybe don't, what's the deal? You're like a restaurant, right?
I think that we are a creative food company.
Okay.
We happen to currently run restaurants, but our aspirations and goals for Clover go far beyond just restaurants. And it's a mission-driven company that's looking to change food behavior and to bring health to consumers, bring health to the local marketplace, and bring delicious food to folks that they can eat and feel really good about. It is a plant-based menu, and it has been around now. We just had our 10th birthday. If anyone here came in on that birthday, I apologize. It was a crazy day for Clover. We rolled back our prices, and we were overwhelmed with
You did vintage
guests.
prices, like prices from 10 years ago? Or?
Prices from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a crazy day, but it was a fun day. So that's what we're doing.
So you say you're a plant-based menu. There's two things that you just said that caught my ear. One, plant-based menu. The other is we aim to change food behavior. So let's take those one at a time. Plant-based menu, but not your typical like vegetarian restaurant, right? That's not out in front. I mean, I think of a lot of vegetarian restaurants that sort of lead with the fact that they're a vegetarian restaurant. That's kind of the whole point. Clover, I know that I've talked to people and who it's like, oh, I've been to a Clover, I've been past them. I didn't even realize that it was plant-based. I didn't even quite realize it's a vegetarian restaurant. What's up with that?
That is something that we take real serious pride in, and is a focus point on our messaging
So
and
it's
our menu.
intentional.
Very intentional, yeah. Our CEO really founded Clover he wanted to do something environmentally oriented, and he was looking at wind, he was looking at solar, and he read an article about the inefficiency of farming animals for food. And that the problem of that inefficiency with population trajectory was going to really, really hurt the environment and was going to be not sustainable. And so he formed a hypothesis, and it was really simple. It was, if I can make food out of plants that is delicious enough for meat eaters to crave, then I can avoid this environmental problem. And with that, he set out and bought a food truck. He was at the time a consultant for McKinsey and Harvard Business School, MIT. Had lots of learning under his belt, and took off into this new venture. And it was really, and still is, highly premised on that mantra. And 88% of our guests eat meat, and yet they choose Clover for many meals.
Are you a meat eater?
I am.
And a Clover eater?
A Clover, I eat so much Clover, it's just unbelievable.
Now, is that required in your contract with the job?
Yeah, I am a food person,
Right.
and part of the reason that I left my job to join Clover.
Yeah, how did you end up at Clover? What's your background in?
Yeah, my background's a little bit odd. So by training, I started in finance, trading options, and the market fell apart. And I went to law school, and I was a clerkship, and I was sure that I was going to be a trial lawyer. And then I realized that trial law was a lot more paperwork than I had bargained for, and a lot less advocacy and talking. And I like to talk. I have a microphone tonight. And I was recruiting a convenience store company to come be my client. They recruited me to be their general counsel, and I ended up being the general counsel for a convenience store in Delhi company called Tedeschi Food Shops. And so they ran about 200 convenience stores here in the Northeast, and I did all of their legal work. I decided I wanted to be more on the business side of what they were doing, and I really liked the employment law, and I really liked training and that type of work. And I was interested in what was going on with Obamacare and health, and that was a big part of the HR. And so I took over as VP of HR for 3 years, and was succession planned into a chief operating officer role. And in that role, about 18 months into being COO of that company, we decided to put the company for sale. And I took it through that M&A process, kind of put my lawyer hat back on, and sold the company ultimately to 7-Eleven. And they asked me to come and help them integrate the company into their systems, their supply chain, their way of doing it, lots of remodels and transition. So I did that for about almost 2 years, and they wanted me to move to Texas. They're based in Texas, and I'm just really attached to the Northeast. I have a lot of family here. And so I said to my wife, I'd really like to do something that I'm passionate about, that I could have, investment from a social and moral standing, and also think that it's a great, great business. So I started interviewing with companies, and Clover came along, and my wife just lost her mind.
She was already sold on Clover, or what?
We had been eating chickpea fritter sandwiches from Clover for over a decade. I think when Air first started selling them, they were like $3 a piece. And my wife came in with an empty white wrapper, and she was like, I just had the best sandwich. And she doesn't eat sandwiches. So we became really, really big fans. And I looked at Clover and I said, my gosh, this is like a unicorn. It's got an unbelievable economic model. It is just the absolute right thing to be doing from a environmental standpoint, from a moral standpoint, and then I also believed, and I still do, it's really, really on trend from a business standpoint.
Why? What about it is on trend? I mean, our theme tonight is, forecasting food. So, trends obviously are at least a part of the equation of the future of food. So what are the things about Clover that you say are on trend?
I actually think part of what's driving the marketplace right now is what happened with human health and the healthcare system. I think that ultimately, when we went through a lot of the change that Obamacare brought us to look at, one of the big things that came out of that process was an increased focus on how we take care of ourselves.
So the idea of rather than waiting until we're sick and trying to figure out a way to deal with it is like a focus more on how are we living so that we don't get sick? Is that kind of the idea?
How are we going to bring healthful opportunities into our lives? Is it working out? Is it how you sleep? Is it what you feed yourself? Is it when you feed yourself? Is it whether you're sensitive to certain kinds of foods? And out of that process, I said that we're a time-starved society. If there's one thing that convenience retailing drilled into my head is that we have less time, we're more on the go, we work more, and we have less time to build delicious meals. And sometimes we find ourselves in a wasteful situation where you've bought something to build a delicious meal, but you don't have the time to do it. And so I kind of put all those together and I said, this is the healthful delivery of fast meals that are good for us is going to stay. And that was really the premise of my thought process on it.
So, we are talking about sort of forecasting food, and I think to all of us, the vast majority of folks raised their hand when I said, have you been to a Clover or have you seen one? From the outset, I was around here when, this company started, and there was something sort of like different about it from the outset, right? The black and white look, the sort of sparseness of the spaces. It kind of looks like maybe it's a classroom or a lab, but it's also clearly a restaurant. You know that there's something sort of future-looking about it. It sort of felt that way from the start. I mean, it's not futuristic, but it felt like this was something different. From your standpoint, in a company that's kind of in the midst of this, and a growing company, by the way, right? You've gone in a decade from one location to how many do you have now?
We're at 11.
You're at 11, all in this region, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so you have 11 locations here. What's changing in the world of food now, and how is Clover sort of meeting that or handling that or dealing with that?
What's changing in the world of food right now is figuring out how to execute variety. True variety. And I think that's
from a menu standpoint, like variety of options. When I go in there, I have a variety of options to eat, or?
Yes, but I think that variety on a number of menu items is a different undertaking than variety on a seasonal and even day part basis, right?
Okay. So you're not talking about, I don't know, like I'm from Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, there's like crazy diners that have like 17-page menus, you know what I mean? That's one kind of variety, right? Like, but that's not what you're talking about.
No,
you're talking about changing it up from breakfast to lunch to dinner to fall to spring to summer?
And even the micro seasons, and even, a bumper crop. Our carrot grower, Michael Doctor, last year had this incredible crop of carrots. And so our variety was, how are we going to use up all of Michael's carrots? We're going to do a sandwich, and we're going to do some salads, and we're going to do a lot of Moroccan slaw out of the carrots. And so the variety that I'm talking about is the nature and quality of what is in season and what is in season right now.
Yeah. And right here, right? Like that.
Locally.
I guess that's the other thing.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges, if anything, that's facing sort of Clover right now? I mean, obviously things are going well. You're growing. But you are one type of restaurant in, a world where there's, you're in a major American city. So you have everything from, fine dining where somebody can go out and get a very, very expensive meal, very, very high quality. And you've got, Burger Kings and McDonald's and Pizza Huts, and you have the whole range of stuff here. What are the challenges for a place like a Clover right now in the sort of wide marketplace of like food options in a major American city?
Well, we're at no shortage for challenges. Whether it's the short shelf life of our food, the fact that we run our own logistics, that we manufacture a lot of our own food. But two of the items that I think are very interesting right now are how the last mile solution is being solved.
Explain what last mile is.
So today, more than any time ever, you're able to have something come from a restaurant or a grocery store directly to your home, whether it's through Uber Eats or Caviar or Whole Foods Delivers or DoorDash, any of these aggregators and last mile logistics. There's also this, and I think Uber kind of led the way, there's this micro logistics network that's happening in our society where you can get from place to place and thing to thing very easily through technology. And that's starting to spill over into the food space. So we're starting to believe that we're up against a non-obvious competitor in the last mile aggregators. And figuring out that, how we solve for that is a challenge. And then also technology and the role it plays in that last mile and the connection to our guests is a very interesting challenge that we're facing right now.
All right, so how, on a broad scale, what are ways that you feel like your company is effectively utilizing technology? I mean, obviously, every day that goes past, we are in a sort of increasingly more technologically advanced world than we were the day before, right? I mean, you look at 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. I mean, it moves so fast. So how are you, as Clover, as a sort of restaurant, utilizing technology right now?
I counted myself among the technologically adept when I joined Clover, and it took me a good 6 months to get all of our tech under my belt.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, we use applicant tracking system that's off the shelf. We use a data management, a business intelligence tool that is pretty in-depth. We've built and maintain our own cloud-based POS system, which takes orders and deals with cash reconciliation and processes payment. We have forecasting tools that we use for managing our food supply, but probably the most poignant for our guests is our app. Our CEO had the foresight to get ahead of the order ahead app process and invested significant human capital and time and effort into building our own app. And it's really beautifully built, and it works really, really nicely. And in the first year of rolling it out, from day one with almost 0 users, we went from 0 users to 23% of our guests now eat at our restaurants through this app.
And how does it's generally just like I'm going to come to the restaurant and either pick food up to go or I'm going to eat in, and I just order it in advance on the app. That's the idea?
Yeah, you attach a payment system to it, and you put in your information, you make your order, and when you arrive at the restaurant, hopefully everything's working properly, you will find a bag or a cup of coffee with your name and your order number on it. Sitting there for you on stadium seating, and you can grab it and enjoy it there or go somewhere and have your meal.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but I want to talk about the future of Clover a little bit. I mean, one of the things that I find interesting about your sort of business model, it seems, is that like you have this sort of central location, this sort of center from which a lot of these restaurants that you have in the area are served, right? Like you're making a ton of your food daily, right? And it's happening kind of at this center of operations and then sort of spreads out to the restaurants from there. Is that replicable? Is this part of the kind of changing food behavior thing that you're talking about? How does that work?
This is in my operational wheelhouse. But yes, it is replicable. There's a couple ways to do it. My preferred choice would be to grow density in this area, go from our current food manufacturing facility to a higher or a larger one that would enable us to serve more restaurants, possibly enter the consumer packaged goods space, and really cement ourselves as a high-functioning restaurant operator in the Northeast. If we were to jump geography, we would need some sort of initial central kitchen. Right now, if you have a pita at Clover, I just said it like my mom. You working at Clover? Yes, Mom, I'm working at Clover. You bring me home some of the pitas? Yes, we make them every night. But we do. We make them every night, and we make about 5,000 on a.
Make 5,000 pitas a night.
On a busy night we'll make about 5 or 6,000 pita, depending on how busy we are. Yeah, and they're made. It's a very interesting process. Some of our restaurants actually have a mural. Has anyone seen the mural on the journey we went through to get the Israeli pita oven approved, the high pressure gas line, the whole thing? Oh, yeah. But yeah, no, we have a flown in from Israel pita oven because Air was like, that is what makes the best pita, and absolutely would not sacrifice on it. Thankfully, we didn't. I mean, they're just amazing. If you go in at 11 p.m. and you eat one off of the fresh out of the oven, it can change your life. It really can. Just right in that minute, right there.
Throw a little clear spices on it, and you're great.
Yeah. But anyways, we flew it in, and we had to get a high pressure gas line approved, and you know that was its own unique journey. But it's a very special piece of equipment. But we have just this beautiful recipe for pita, and so we make it every night. That would be the tricky part if we had to go somewhere. Is how would we deal with the bread?
Yeah, and so, but is the idea, like, you know, you said in the beginning of this that your CEO started the company with the idea being that, like, he wanted to do something to sort of change the world, right? He was looking at wind, he was looking at solar, and he eventually decided that, like, changing food behavior, as you said, getting meat eaters to eat plant-based food because that's sustainable in a way that, you know, raising meat for 7 or 8 billion people on the planet is not. But, like, that was the mission. And so, you know, from that standpoint, you know, from a business standpoint, it's like 11 restaurants in the Massachusetts area, amazing. But is the goal here like that, like, Clover is kind of like McDonald's, you know, like that it's all over the world, but operating on like a different sort of model? Is that the big dream?
Both Air and I would be quite proud to have the market penetration that McDonald's has.
Yeah.
I do not think it is out of the realm. I think
Really?
that consuming trends and how unique our food is. Our VP of food is just a brilliant food person. You were talking about palates and how well you taste food. I think that we can get there. I really do.
And that is the goal.
It
like,
is,
It
yes.
is. Like, you want to be, the thought is Clover's all over the world, people eating Clover foods, and the whole system being one that is more local, sustainable, and better for the environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's hear it for him. Inevitably, cannabis is obviously now legal here in the state of Massachusetts, and so it's opened up a whole new world of businesses and creative thinkers. And of course, somebody came up with the intersection of ice cream and cannabis. Again, just to note, no cannabis in the ice cream tonight. But we're going to bring up a man who is in that world, who is going to sort of bridge the gap between cannabis and ice cream here in Massachusetts and beyond. Please welcome to the stage the CEO and founder of Cloud Creamery, Mr. David Youssef Zadeh. Talk me through this. You love ice cream, and then one day, and you kind of enjoy cannabis sometimes, and one day you're like, let me bring these two together, like Reese's peanut butter cups. Chocolate and peanut butter.
I would say in general, I would consider myself kind of a fat kid on the inside. I mean, I think food is exciting in every way, shape, and form for me. And I grew up with parents that cook really well, so I was always interested in food. And my father is Middle Eastern, my mother is French and Native American. I grew up in Kentucky, and my best friend was Japanese. So
Classic. Who hasn't had that?
Every day of the week.
That's my childhood too.
Every day of the week, it was something not just delicious, but challenging my brain and learning something new. So it kind of set the trajectory to always be interested in it. And when I was young, I watched, the traveling chefs of Europe on PBS and would literally VHS record them and go back. And, my brothers were superstar athletes, and I wanted to bake cookies with my mother. So it just kind of kept going on this path. But, I got into the restaurant industry when I was 14 and stayed until I was 31. Throughout the process, realized that chefs don't eat really well. They don't sleep well. Stress is in their body way more than it should be, lots of adrenaline. And in 2011, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and went through a really kind of, it's ironic to have Crohn's disease and be a chef. You really have to watch what you eat and kind of everything along the way. But went through some medications that didn't work, and I didn't love the way that I felt on them. And a lot of family members and friends were pushing for cannabis, and I wasn't. I smoked a few joints in high school or something, but I was never a person that you would associate with cannabis, full blown, and decided that I didn't want to smoke it, but I wanted to eat it. Started going to dispensaries, and the food that was available was just not for me. It was gummy bears and lots of things that I don't eat anyway, unless, my niece is around on Easter or something. So started, just really saw an opportunity, and ice cream is something I think that in general people are happy to have. It brings joy. It might, take you to being a kid or a reward or something to that effect. And so, it just kind of clicked. I don't know.
So when did you sort of start into this world of going like, all right, like let's bridge the gap between cannabis and ice cream?
I'd say it was probably about 2 years ago. I think, I'm always cooking for friends. I'm always nominated to be the one to cook. So you start with your friends, right? With anything, you get like...
Absolutely. Test market, built-in test market, right?
They're the guinea pigs. So there were definitely times where, they weren't driving home. So really finding that balance of celebrating the flavor that goes along with cannabis and, still having a really thoughtful dinner was something that we accepted as a challenge. I think, my business partner, Sean, and I wanted to break the stigma and really talk about different aspects and different angles of consuming. And I think, how many people in here are having a drink right now? And the reality is you could be drinking a cannabis beverage that has the same potency that a beer does or that a glass of wine does. It's just culturally, and the optics of it have been really challenging. So
right now, where you're at, like what is the business? Is it that you're gonna have is the goal I can go into, well, not a Tedeschi anymore, but a 7-Eleven and buy like a pint of cannabis ice cream? Is it something that I get at a restaurant after a meal? Is it something that you have like some sort of store that I have to come in to eat it? Like what's the goal here?
Yeah, so I think all the above. It's really tough to tell someone that you have to call a doctor if you're in pain, or you have to get a prescription if you're having cramping, or whatever it may be, whatever you go through, and I think people should have access to it. So different avenues are definitely appropriate. Our goal specifically is really just to get great food out there that celebrates the plant more so than actually try to convince anyone to do something they don't want to do. I think there's a massive, gray market that maybe your boss wouldn't love it, maybe your partner wouldn't love it, maybe you don't want to, smoke in front of your friends or something to that effect. But I think that there's, really great options, especially alternatives to alcohol that go along with it. And we are the ones that are hoping to kind of put it in front of people.
So what are you doing right now in the day-to-day with this company? What's happening?
Lots happening.
Is it a lot of back-end regulation stuff? This is newly legal here in the state of Massachusetts. Sure. Obviously different states have different laws, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what's happening?
Regulation is a big item. I think a lot of the policymakers that are in place right now, I don't think Massachusetts was ready for it. I'm glad that they passed it, but it's 4 to 6 months to get a permit, which is challenging because you have to have a space leased. And what do you do with 4 to 6 months of a leased space where you can't make any income on it? And that's just that's the tip of the iceberg. So a lot of massive companies from Colorado and California are coming to the East Coast to start this, which a lot of people don't want. But the reality is it's extremely prohibitive for a small business owner and a startup to kind of get in the space. So you have to be willing to leverage your mortgage and other things to do it. So our day-to-day right now is doing a lot of events. We shipped off some ice cream to Dave Chappelle and some of his people for an event this weekend in Ohio, so only hemp, which is legal. But we're really trying to just get it out in front of people.
So you're making this. You're making cannabis
We're making
infused ice cream.
Correct.
And is the idea here that like I'm gonna eat this ice cream, I'm going to enjoy the flavor and get high? Is that what's happening here?
Some of them. We have a dinner series where all the desserts have some element of our company in them. Ice cream, it's not always ice cream, could be a sorbet. I mean, there's a couple of them floating around. That is definitely much more THC focused. I think those dinners, the people that are coming to those dinners want to explore that and kind of taste it in different platforms. The idea right now is to really celebrate the plant. So there's terpenes, which are like the flavor profile. So if you've smoked or opened a bag of weed, you smell sometimes like a skunk, sometimes citrus, sometimes it smells diesel, sometimes there's all different kinds, and there's lots of hybrids that kind of come up with this. And getting back to the same conversation that Claire had with you of kind of single origin strains, finding those strains and really even removing the THC, but keeping the flower in the food. So we make a pickling liquid where you can actually taste the buds, the flowers in a pickle without getting high. So that's kind of the purpose behind it.
So it's not all necessarily about the high. It's
No,
about
not
the
at all.
fact that like, okay, like we're sort of, if you want to put it in these terms, progressing as a society where we say like this is a plant that's not particularly dangerous, that can be eaten, that can be like
Sure.
used in a whole bunch of ways.
Clothing, rope, shoes, all types of things. It cleans the soil. It could be
And full
anything and
spectrum
everything.
for you, from the aspects of it where you can enjoy like a buzz of some sort to
Sure.
just the flavor. You're saying like, let's elevate this thing and like use
Yeah.
it for what it was meant to be used for.
Absolutely. I think, growing up with just seeing a cop car going by and hiding something, to now it's like, wait, it's not illegal, is really allowing us to put it into different avenues, put it into beverages, put it into food, put it into ice cream, put it into, we're making a grill marinade, put it into, all different elements. We're aging cheese for 6 months that's wrapped in a cannabis cure and then wrapped in leaves in Vermont.
Really?
So we'll see what happens. It could be terrible. We don't know, but we want to be those thought leaders going out there and saying what could happen. I'm not saying we're going to find penicillin, but we really want to
But you
explore
might.
it. But there's no data on it, and there's no one doing it. And I think it's just really something that, there was a statistic that came out in 2018 that Colorado profited almost $17 million a month on average from cannabis sales. And it's like, we could raise teacher salaries, we could fix the roads, there's so many things we could do for our state, for our country, that it's been a very, 1980s, Richard Nixon to Ronald Reagan, to current day, it's an issue that we need to talk about and get over, but a lot of it is just getting it in front of people and literally changing their minds.
So for those of us who are here, those of us who live in this region, and you're operating in this region, what are my ways of accessing now what it is that you do?
Mine specifically, so we just received our permit from Framingham 12 days ago, 14 days ago, so we have to pass the final health inspection, and then we'll be able to sell CBD and hemp anywhere. We can ship it across the country, we can sell it on Amazon if we wanted to. Those items will be available in Temescal Wellness, a dispensary in Framingham. We're still talking to Netta, it'll be in Sierra Naturals in Somerville. So there'll be stores that you can walk in and buy it. Now, a lot of these dispensaries aren't 21 plus yet. Netta in Brookline just passed, but the line is 3 hours long to get in, so no one's really going. We're trying to get it into places like Whole Foods. We would love to go to, I think someone even mentioned earlier about a farmer's market. We would love to have access like that, but it's just regulation-wise, it's not there yet. Getting day permits we asked the city to have a day permit to do a food truck at Boston Calling, and they said absolutely not. And I said, it's legal, we were gonna do CBD, and they said, well, we can't have alcohol with it together. And we're like, well, yeah, alcohol is the problem. Like, that's the issue. That's what we're trying to say. Like, that's exactly. So it's still it's a matter of time. It's also, generational, but until a different generation gets in the seats of policy making, the access will be limited.
So what are the products?
So we have, so there was an avocado dark chocolate avocado dark chocolate coconut that came around.
Yeah, what
There
are
was,
we eating right now?
This is a blueberry, sage, and ginger, and then there was a mango, strawberry, and thyme that was out earlier as well.
So the idea is that like you're making these delicious sorbets and ice creams, but they're cannabis infused.
Exactly. Yeah, just delicious food. I mean, again, kind of back to the dispensary. It's like if I wanted to find an edible, whether it's traveling, whether it was something I was going to use before work, I didn't want to smell, whatever the scenario may be, you know, the things that are available at all of them are gummy bears that have high fructose corn syrup and artificial coloring and artificial flavoring, and you go buy a brownie, but you have no idea where that chocolate came from, and it's been sitting somewhere for a long period of time. So we're trying to really just say, you know, our strong suit is food. We know how to cook. It's what we've done, you know, for our entire lives, and we're trying to put it in a CPG, in a consumer packaged good product in front of people.
So in the sort of lead up to kind of really entering the stage here in Massachusetts full time as you're kind of working through this, you've done a number of things, test cases and stuff. You were hired, as I understand, to throw a party at the Grammys. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I can't talk about all of it. We were hired by Cypress Hill. I don't know how old everyone is in this room, but Cypress Hill, so Be
If
Real.
you were alive in the 90s.
And then, yeah, it was Mike Tyson, 2 Chainz, Mike Tyson, 2 Chainz, The Game, and Cypress Hill. So it was it was a really weird party.
Where was this?
Yeah, I mean, this was 2 months ago. What, the Grammys? Mid-February?
And this is out in California?
This was in Los Angeles, and we were invited to this building that was used. It kind of felt like this like LA Confidential old school. Like the elevator was literally, you know, you had to shut the door yourself and turn the crank and go up. And so we're like, what are we getting into? So we go up to the 12th floor, and there's no kitchen, there's no freezer. And this is like the morning of. So we have, you know, I have sorbet base. I brought the blueberry, sage, and ginger there. And so we're like, guys, we knew you asked us to bring ice cream. Where are we going to put it? How are we going to serve it? And they're all kind of like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's a frozen product. So 400 people, it's challenging if you don't have a freezer. So we called a friend who runs a restaurant in LA and had liquid nitrogen, and we poured it in on site and stirred it on site to order for lots of people. So yeah, I think my shoulder's still recovering, but yeah, we get to do lots of fun events. That's definitely, as I mentioned, you know, Dave Chappelle and Erykah Badu are doing this thing in Ohio this weekend. So it's starting to hit the realm of people that are comfortable in their community with cannabis, want to try it, and obviously California is a big proponent and has been there for a long time. So,
not to back you up, but did you actually make cannabis ice cream for Mike Tyson? Did you and like Mike Tyson eat ice cream cones together? Like
so he was actually smoking, and I served him a scoop, and we traded, and so we didn't like share a sundae together. That'd be pretty epic. But I think there's a video on Instagram of The Game taking a couple bites while I'm standing there in front of him. So it was a whole. I mean, it was a weird night. I'll leave it there.
You know, our theme here is kind of forecasting food, right? And the future of food. And, you know, not that it's an unintended consequence, but it's funny because I think that for a lot of people, when cannabis was legalized here in Massachusetts, or even prior to that, when it was legalized for medical purposes, right? I think most people sort of generally have the notion of like, this is like a drug that you smoke a joint or whatever. Sure. And, you know, obviously, whether people realize it or not, there's people like you who are like, no, this is a plant and you can do all kinds of things with it, and there's all kinds of food stuff. Yeah. Like, how big of a part of the world of food do you suspect cannabis will become as more states kind of...
I think it'll be the biggest. I think food and beverage will be absolutely the biggest market, and I think, you know, I was talking to a few people earlier about it. It has to be accessible to everyone's lifestyle. Smoking is a really specific, challenging, you know, element that a lot of people don't want to get into, and we don't want to push anyone into that, and that's why we don't sell flour or vape or anything of the sort. But food is something that has always felt like healing, whether it's emotional, physical, you know, it always connects you to a certain place. Even smelling some of Claire's spices, it's like, I think of my grandma instantly with this one specific blend that she has. But we want to create a brand that people trust. People know we're doing our due diligence, that we're going through all these processes, that we abide by all the rules, but also create this market for what we call kind of the cannabis connoisseurs. And I don't mean that economically. I just mean people that actually care about where their food is coming from and want to explore it with us. So food and beverage, I mean, there's so much money going into the cannabis space right now. It's insane. I would say it's the fastest growing market, and I can't think of something that would compete with it. I mean, it's nuts, especially even on the East Coast right now because all the West Coast money is coming over. But the food and beverage scene, as far as kind of, looking forward, breaking out of cookies, brownies, gummy bears, I think those are the 3 biggest sellers in all dispensaries across the country. We really have to find ways to get it into people's lives. So again, as I mentioned, cheese, grill marinades, we have some almond butter gummies that are no sugar added, sweetened with maple syrup, completely natural, but also have protein in them. So we're trying to push those to Lifetime Fitness, Core Power Yoga, lots of kind of Equinox style gyms. But it's really meant more not just to be an individual experience, not just to go to a dispensary and buy a bag and bring it home. It's more to, hey, we're going to have everyone over tonight. We can have a chimichurri that we can put over a pork loin or something to that effect and really share it with everyone. So we're kind of just change the culture around absorbing it in every way.
If I'm listening to you here tonight and I'm like, yeah, I'm into this, how do I sort of connect with you? What stuff do you have coming up in the near future that we can sort of be a part of?
Sure. So as you might have seen, there's pictures of fish up here, which are not, we don't make fish ice cream. We have a dinner series called Eat Sacrilegious. So if you just go to our Instagram page, you can connect it with it. We do usually one a month. I think we're doing one next Saturday that's sold out, but we have one coming up for the Nantucket Wine Festival, and just kind of come in. But
what happens at these dinner series?
Lots of weird stuff.
Mike Tyson comes over. Totally normal. It's totally normal. Tyson comes by. You smoke a blunt with him.
It's totally normal. So I mean, again, the goal is not to get everyone high. The goal is to, if you were going to go to a fine dining restaurant and have 5 courses or 7 courses and have wine pairings or beverage pairings, we're trying to do that with strain-specific cannabis that match the flavor of each dish. So this, for example, a crudo hamachi with a sumac vinaigrette that's infused, roasted cauliflower and a cauliflower puree underneath. So you're getting cannabis, but it's in a proper, designed dish. So we try to give everyone 10 to 15 milligrams over the course of a meal, which if you're a rookie, I would say that's enough. Mike Tyson's probably in like the 150, 200 milligram
He's a big
dose.
man,
He is a big,
he's
a big guy.
There's a lot of meat on those bones.
We also, in this, we're curing egg yolks and cannabis that we shaved over a dish, but we make sure that the element that's infused in every course, we set 10%, 20% of it aside, like the vinaigrette for this salad. We set it aside that's not infused. So if you're like, hey, I'm starting to feel like a vegetable, chill me out, we can give you the rest of the meal and have the same experience without being infused.
Amazing. You mentioned a couple times your Instagram. What is the Instagram if I want to follow you guys?
So Cloud Creamery is the ice cream. My personal one is Chef Youssef, which has Cloud Creamery and the dinner series underneath it. So it's probably the easiest way to connect to it.
David, Youssef, I'm going to say it wrong. We went over this like 400 times. David Youssef Zadeh.
Yep.
Let's hear it for him. And thanks to everybody for coming out for Boston Talks.